Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning. And today, we've got another new and interesting combination to try out. And it's one that one of you guys sent in. So big thank you to Joseph for sending not only the shells we're going to test today, but the choke as well. And I'm really curious to see what today's shell and choke combination can actually do, because I have never really seen a whole lot of anything about these shells. So we're going to test them and see what they can actually do. But as for the shells we've got here today, Joseph sent in some of these. These are some Tungsten Super Slam TSS shells. They are a 20 gauge 3-inch ounce and 5/8 of number 9 TSS shot, moving about 1100 feet per second. And it says here on the box that they have 585 pellets in here, so definitely a pretty good amount of pellets. But I have seen very little about these Super Slam TSS shells, so I guess we're going to put them to the test and see if they're actually decent, or if you should stick to a little bit more the quote-unquote household type of name TSS shells. I have some high hopes for them, but I really just don't know until we actually shoot one. And as for the setup we've got to run them through today, I brought out the Stevens 301 20 gauge here with this choke, which Joseph also sent us. This is a Carlson's heavyweight TSS turkey choke. It's a 555 constriction, so definitely starting to get down there into the tighter 20 gauge range. Will that help us out or work out with these Super Slam TSS shells? I don't know, but we're going to find out one way or the other. But as for the test today, everything is the same as usual. The turkey paper set up at 40 yards. I've also got the chronograph so we can get our velocity out of those shells. So we'll get you guys a view of the target, take the shot, look at the chrono, and then look at the results. I have some high hopes for this combination, but I really just don't know how these are going to do, since I really have not seen a ton of anything on them. So let's go over here and take the shot and just see what kind of a pattern this combination is actually capable of giving us. Okay, so that shell gave us 1195 through the chrono, so we are a little bit above their claim. And I gotta say, for a 20 gauge shell, those Tungsten Super Slams had a little bit of oomph behind them. Probably one of the higher recoiling 20 gauge shells I've ever shot. Maybe that was because they are a 1 5/8 ounce in a 3-inch shell. I don't know. I mean, I've shot other 1 5/8 ounce 20 gauge loads, but these definitely had a little bit more kick behind them than what you might think for a 20 gauge shell. Either way, nothing too weird to see up here as far as velocity goes. But how did they actually pattern down there at 40 yards? Let's go check it out and see what we got. Alright, now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and this is what we got. And unfortunately, we were a touch off to the right. I don't think that was me. I just think it was this combination, whether it be the choke or the shell or both together. But that's why you test your setup before you actually take it out to hunt with it. But either way, what we see here is definitely pretty interesting. That is a lot of shot on paper for a 20 gauge shell. And our core is definitely nice and dense and hot over here. There's no doubt about that. I mean, just off the edge of that turkey paper, there's so many pellets right there that it just looks like a clump of Sharpie marks. So definitely a lot of shot in your core area, that's for sure. Plenty good enough for a 40-yard pattern all day long. It does give you a little bit of leeway. As you can see, we were off to the right, but we still do have a dead bird here. There is one through the brain and several more down the spine. So you have a nice hot core. It does give you leeway, but looking outside of that core area, we definitely see some flyers and some little stringy stuff around the edges. I mean, there's one pellet all the way up in the top left corner up there. So definitely not perfect around the edges. Now, is it just these Super Slam shells, or is it the choke being a little bit on the tight side for what these might actually want? I don't know. We need to do some more testing with it and see. Either way though, definitely a very good starting point for these shells and this choke. It's not a perfect pattern. We saw those flyers. And even though we do have a nice hot core area here, it's not necessarily perfect either. There are some little bit hotter spots in it than others. There's not really a ton of voids necessarily. It just isn't quite perfectly even. And maybe I'm nitpicking a little bit because that is clearly plenty good enough. But still, I think just by looking at how this pattern performed, I think we can do a little bit better. Probably with a little bit more open of a choke, since that is a 1 5/8 ounce load instead of something like a 1 1/4. But for a starting point, that's a turkey pattern that you could absolutely take out to 40, 45 yards and probably even 50 as well. So definitely not off to a bad start, but I think we can do a little bit better if we tune it in with the right choke. So we're just going to have to test them and see what they can actually do through some of those other chokes. Okay, and here's the wad from that shell, and as you can see, it definitely looks a little bit banged up, but it did go through a 655, which is on the tighter side for a 20 gauge, so it's not completely surprising, but there's nothing stuck down in there. There's no major rips or tears in it. There are a couple little pinholes and stuff around through here, but nothing I wouldn't necessarily expect to see from a TSS shell going through that tight of a choke. It looks about expected, and that's just another thing that leads me to believe that maybe these might want a little bit more of an open constriction. Maybe a 565 or a 570 might really bring these shells out. Either way though, the wad definitely didn't really surprise us at all. Nothing really too special to see out of it. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about that pattern right there? Definitely not a bad start whatsoever, but I think we can get a little bit better with the right choke. I think that 1 5/8 ounce payload is probably going to prefer a little bit more of an open choke, but we just got to test it and see. Either way, as for today's initial results there, definitely not looking too bad. But what do you guys think about that? Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little bit surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these Super Slam TSS shells? And if so, what has been your results with them? And maybe what other chokes might you want to see this shell fire through? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.